Welcome to a special monthly edition of Spirit Journey Collective, where we step away from interviews and dive deep into the collective energies of the upcoming month. For those who do not know, I am an intuitive tarot reader and spiritual channel. This episode will be focused on exploring the energies of the month ahead, such as themes, both good and challenging areas to be mindful of, as well as a channeled higher self message overall. As this is a collective reading, it is important to always remember to take what resonates and leave what doesn't. It is my belief that if you are tuning in today, it is because there is some form of guidance and wisdom waiting for you. But it doesn't mean the entire reading will resonate, although it may. My name is Sarah Ty, and I am your host, reader, and channeler for the upcoming reading ahead. And without further ado, let's dive in.
Hi, and happy September. Thank you so much for tuning in for another monthly collective reading. I am a little bit under the weather today as I did get COVID back to school. Unfortunately, brought COVID into my home. So I am on the mend, but not 100%. So trying to get back into the swing of things over here. But it is September. Fall is almost here. I'm so glad fall is my favorite season and I'm tired of the heat. Anyways, so I went ahead and did my typical reading, but a lot came up for this month. So normally I only pull 4 cards, but this time I ended up pulling 3 clarifier cards as well on top of the 4. So there's 7 cards on the table instead of the 4. So there's going to be a theme. There's going to be what's working for us and what to be mindful of moving into the month of September, what could be holding us back or challenging for the month of September, as well as a higher self message overall. And I do feel like this one's going to get a little deep, but that happens. And I feel like that's just one of those things where what comes through, and it's because someone needed to hear it. And so once again, as I've said before, if you're tuning in, please take what resonates and leave what doesn't. All of it might resonate completely with you, and maybe only bits and pieces. Either way, I do believe if you're tuning in, there is something here for you. So starting with the theme, I pulled the 4 of Cups reversed, as well as the King of Wands for the clarifier. So the 4 of Cups upright usually speaks to being emotionally overwhelmed and needing to set some boundaries. It's like if someone were to hand you a cup of whatever it is that's overwhelming you, you're like, oh no, I cannot take another sip of that. No more. And when it's reversed, though, it can come through a couple of different ways. But what I'm picking up is that this is more of a you had to put up an emotional boundary somewhat recently where you just couldn't deal with a particular, could be a person, could be a thing, could be a limiting belief, it could be healing. Sometimes when we're on the healing path, we just need a break from it. But you got to this point where instead of just putting up the boundary of, oh, I can't right now it's starting to become a little bit unhealthy. And there's more of a wall up instead of just a firm boundary in place. And so what happens when we put a wall up is that we're actually ready to start letting that thing back in, but we're not wanting to because there's that fear of getting hurt. There's that fear of getting overwhelmed again. And so we just kind of wall off and choose not to let anything in, which the unfortunate thing is, yes, maybe you're keeping out some of the toxic and bad things you don't want in your life, but you're also keeping everything out, not just the toxic and bad things. You're literally walling yourself off to any possibility. And with the clarifier being the King of Wands, I really feel like there's a push here from the universe saying it's time to start letting whatever it is that you had to put on the back burner for a little bit to heal or to take time for you. It's time to start letting things emotionally in again. And so this could be in the guise of a new relationship. Like let's say one ended and you had to really wall yourself off and put up some firm boundaries, but maybe you got to the point where now you're not letting anybody in and you're ready to start letting someone in. Or maybe you were starting a new endeavor, a new project, and it was going good until maybe things were getting a little bit sideways. And then you put it on the back burner. And now you're afraid to reopen that project because it went sideways and you're afraid it'll do that again. So, whatever it is that you really felt like you emotionally had to be like, I can't, no more right now, and take a break from, that's really all it was meant to be. It was meant to be a break. It was meant to be a time to just take for yourself to just kind of rest emotionally, break away from it for a bit. So that way you were ready to come back when you were, in better spirits and better headspace and emotionally more balanced, and let yourself be open again. And so with the King of Wands here, the King of Wands is like, it's a really creative card. It's basically saying that the sky is the limit. You're being called to really step into your creative power, into your leadership skills, into really creating your own path. So being authentic to yourself as well. So even, sometimes we go after a particular goal or dream or project and we think we have to do it a cookie cutter way, like the way that everyone else has done it. But a lot of what the King of Wands comes to say is no, you got to do it your own way. You got to blaze your own trail, and you got to find a way that works for you, not what's worked for someone else, because what works for someone else may not work for you, and likely in this case won't. So I feel like the theme is really saying it's time to drop the wall. It's time to start letting things in emotionally again. And it's time to really, in this case, I feel like it's saying get back on that path of moving forward, being brave, letting your creativity flow, and then carving out your own way as you do it. So that's our theme, which already starts off kind of heavy and kind of like big, like a bigger picture type theme. But I do love this because if you find yourself stuck emotionally, a higher self is tapping you on the shoulder and saying, it's because now you're choosing to be stuck. It's because now you're choosing not to let new opportunities in, and you're choosing to stay walled off because it's safe. But that's not going to get you to the next level. That's not going to take you to the next step in your life. It's actually going to hold you back. And not only that, but with the King of Wands here, you're really being called to use that fiery energy, that creative energy, to start blazing your own trail again. So, what to be mindful of that's a positive aspect for September? I pulled the Page of Cups reversed, as well as the Nine of Cups reversed as the clarifier. So I find that super interesting because usually, being in the positive aspect, the reverse cards could get a little bit opposite of that, like come through as more of a negative trait versus a positive one. But sometimes, depending on the reading, I'll read the reversals as more of a awareness. There's an awareness piece to it. So it may be kind of a negative card, but it's actually more of a positive because that awareness piece is going to help you not let that negativity keep you down. So the Page of Cups upright is what I like to call the inner child card. It's another very creative card. It's very much rooted in your sacral chakra, which is like the womb. So the creativity is very fluid, it's very feminine, it's very emotional. There's also like a element of being present and being in your joy. And so it's more of like a fluidity, emotional type of a creativity. And I call it the inner child card because there's a lot of inner child work that usually comes with that. So when you look at a child who's playing, who's being creative, they are just in their own little world. They're present, they're manifesting their ideas as they go. And as we get older, as we become adults, we forget how to play like we did when we were children. And not only that, but society teaches us not to. Society teaches us to work hard, play later. And this one is one of the big ones, is saying, no, 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 no. You need to find your joy in the work you do, in the moment to moment. You got to really get into that mindset of a child. If you ever see a child, like, look, think of it this way. When there's a magic show, right? Have you ever seen a child watch a magician do these creative tricks, right? The kids just light up, but the grown-ups tend to be really tend to look at it more from a, oh, I wonder how they do it, or trying to find the trick, or trying to see how they did the sleight of hand. They're trying to find how they're doing it instead of just enjoying the magic for what it is. So that's another piece of the Page of Cups, is learning how to be present and be in wonderment like a child would be. So moving into the month of September, I do feel like there is inner child work likely already starting in your life. So there's probably some healing that's being done. We are maybe going backwards and looking at old childhood wounds, or maybe you're even getting reconnected with your inner child. We all have a version of that within us, where you're actually starting to maybe communicate with your inner child and talk to that version of you and acknowledge that version of you. But I do feel like the reason why it's coming up in the positive of September is it's saying that you're finally doing the inner child work that needs to be done. And really reconnecting with that version of yourself is what's going to help you, especially with learning how to drop your guard and be more open and be more vulnerable in a way that's going to allow opportunities and creativity to flow through you more freely. And that really speaks volumes with the clarifier, because it's the Nine of Cups reversed. And so right now, many of you do struggle with the vulnerability, which again speaks a lot to the Four of Cups reversed. The Nine of Cups upright is all about dreaming and visioning and believing in possibilities and imagining where you want to go, what kind of life you want to have, what kind of things you want to happen in your life, what kind of things you want to manifest. It's really believing all of that is possible and being in that state of vulnerability enough to say, I am open for the universe to give so I can receive what I'm desiring. Now, what happens most of the time, and so that's like the upright position. Now, speaking to the reversed, what happens to a lot of us is we have moments where we have these big dreams and we really believe it's possible. And then we put our all into it. And then the door that we thought we were going to be walking through shuts on us and it gets closed. And when that happens, many of us shut down. We don't want to be in that place of hurt again. We don't want to get our hopes up and then get them dashed again because it hurt too much. So we wall off, very similar to the Four of Cups. We wall off. And then we start to become more realistic and reasonable, and we stop believing in the big dreams. We just stop believing it's possible, and we do that to feel safe. So I feel like the reason why that came up reversed next to the Page of Cups reversed, I feel like the Page of Cups is saying that there's an awareness around doing inner child work that's actually going to help, like I said, open you up to being more vulnerable, to being able to dream again, to be able to let yourself believe in possibilities again. And the Nine of Cups reversed is saying that right now there's a lot of fears around being open. There's a lot of fears around getting your hopes up and them getting dashed. And the the work around the Page of Cups, that awareness piece is actually going to help you break through that fear of being vulnerable and open to those dreams and possibilities again. I also want to say too that just to speak to those that may be listening and go, well, yeah, I've gotten my hopes up and it fell apart. Why would I risk that again? So here's the thing, when we dream and manifest and imagine what we want and work hard to get whatever that is, it's not always going to show up in the way that we think it will. In fact, it often doesn't. And so what happens is whatever door that we think is opening for us, that we think is our door to go through, that's likely not our door if it closes on us. But that doesn't mean there's not another door coming. So the invitation is to be open and vulnerable, even if whatever it is you're hoping for doesn't work out the way that you want it to. When you're open and vulnerable enough to say, okay, that door wasn't for me. I'm going to stay open and trust that there is another door coming, and I'm not going to wall myself off. I'm going to still be in surrender with the universe and trust that, okay, that door wasn't for me, but there is one that's coming. When we wall ourselves off and say, I'm not doing that again, well, at that point, even if the universe tries to open another door, you're no longer looking for it. You're no longer open to receive it. So it's now invisible to you. So I do feel like the positive aspect of the month of September is to lean into that inner child work. Help yourself open up to wonderment, to dreaming again, to believing in possibility. Drop down your guard, let things and opportunities in, which will reconnect you with your creativity and reconnect you with dreaming big again. So, the more challenging aspect of the month of September is the Page of Pentacles, which I find super fascinating because it's like the positive aspect and the challenging aspect are almost swapped because this card, the way it's showing up, is actually normally a very positive card. And right now it's showing up in the challenging aspect. But I really love this because I like to call the Page of Pentacles my purpose card. It usually means one of your biggest passions and missions here on earth, like one of the things you're supposed to be dialing into and plugging into and connecting with your magic and your gifts comes from this kind of energy. So I feel like whenever this one is up, especially in kind of that negative challenging aspect, it's saying that your purpose is trying to connect with you. It's orbiting you. And either you already have it in your life and you're just not devoting your time to it, maybe because you're afraid to dream big or afraid to dream, afraid to allow that it's really possible for you to really connect with this thing. Or it could just be orbiting you and you haven't connected with it yet, but you're also not open to connect with it. But it's there, it's trying to reach out to you and plug in with you. And so I also want to speak to purpose a little bit because some people hear purpose and they think it means job. It means career, right? It means, oh, I have to go do some kind of side hustle, or I have to go be an artist or be an actor or be in the world of service where you're like actively being a coach or a mentor or something like that. That's not, that could be, that very well could be, but that's not always what that is. So purpose is really finding that thing that lights you up. It could be a hobby. It doesn't necessarily have to be what you get paid to do, right? It's something that just lights you up that you could do all day long. Like if you really didn't have any other obligations, you'd probably be doing this thing. That's how much you love it and it fuels you and it's so rewarding for you. And something about doing this thing gives back to the world in some way. So it can come in many different forms. And when I say give back to the world in some way, it doesn't always mean it's of service. It's not always in service the way that you think it might be. So, for instance, if you're a musician, your music that you put out in the world, it's going to inspire someone else. Just like being an artist, you might put a work of art out there that someone will buy and put in their living room and then inspires them every single day. You know, it could be just learning how to live in the moment and to just enjoy every moment to moment to moment situation, holding the door open for someone when they're having a really awful day and giving them a smile. It's so much. It's not always the lofty big career job thing. It's just really being connected with being who you are at your core, being authentic, and really just being more in touch with the things that light you up and the things that bring you joy, which makes it easier to connect and love people around you. So, connection comes from being connected with your purpose, interestingly enough. So, some people think, oh my gosh, this new generation is all about me, 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 me. And then, in some aspects, I do feel like the balance is way off. But ultimately, when you are connected with yourself, you're doing what you love, you're lit up by being in touch with that thing that just feels so good and so rewarding to you. And it's a thing that's in some aspect gives back to the world in some way. It's so much easier because now you're more connected with yourself. There's no shame, or there's less shame, there's less trauma holding you back from being you, which makes it easier to connect with others on a really meaningful basis, in a really meaningful way. So yeah, I feel like the challenging aspect of September, it's really tying into this being afraid to be vulnerable, walling yourself off, from your creativity, from your inner child, from being able to be present and being in your play and being, allowed to believe in the big possibilities. And the big possibilities, like I said, it doesn't always have to be a career. It could just be finding your joy. That is a big dream that most people feel like they'll never find because they're always chasing happiness without realizing that joy is really where it's at. And joy is created in the moment. It's living moment to moment. So being able to connect with your joy is also a big deal too, but being able to believe that it's even possible to be in touch with your joy on a day-to-day basis. And then knowing that your purpose is really just trying, it's knocking on your door. And the negative or challenging aspect, I feel, is like if we can't learn to be more open, be more creative, believe in possibilities, then we might miss the opportunity to really plug in with our purpose now. And it doesn't mean it'll never come around again, nothing like that. But it does mean that it might delay you connecting with it, though, to a later time. Or, you might know what that is. You might already know what you love to do, but you're afraid to really own it. You're afraid to really believe it's possible that you could really go after this dream. So you don't. And then you find yourself doing the mundane things you don't want to do. You find yourself doing more of that because now you're still not devoting your time to your purpose. So higher self message overall. I know this is probably getting pretty long. Higher self message overall. I have the 2 of Cups reversed and the 3 of Wands reversed. 2 of Cups, I like to call this my shadow card. So really plugging back into the inner child work, the walling yourself off, the being afraid to believe in possibilities. A lot of that's going to go right back to your childhood. It's going to go right back to your shadow. Your shadow are the parts of you that you abandoned, that you decided weren't good enough. And it wasn't necessarily that you decided those parts weren't good enough. You experienced things growing up from your caregivers, from teachers, from maybe your peers that made you feel less than when you were in touch with these parts of yourself. So you abandoned them. You threw them in your shadow. Sometimes we heard, oh, you're too loud. You're too hyper. You're too obnoxious. You're too talkative. You're too quiet. You're too sensitive. You're too, you're always in your head. You're too imaginative, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's these pieces of us that we deemed when we were very young weren't good enough. So we threw them in our shadow and we abandoned them. So shadow work is all about finding those pieces of ourselves and integrating them back together and finding ways to love all of us and not just the parts of us that we thought only society would love. It's helping you get back to your more authentic version of you. There's a lot of resistance around this with it being reversed. So I do feel like that inner child work is the stepping stone to the shadow. And I'm liking that I'm getting that the inner child work is one that I feel like a lot of you are starting to welcome into your life and get curious about and do some healing around. That is going to introduce you to your shadow. And so there's this huge invitation to lean into that because it's just inviting you to some really big healing that's going to open up these possibilities, your creativity, all of that. And then the clarifier card I pulled for the higher self message is the 3 of Wands reversed. This one is really just saying that the 3 of Wands upright speaks to being in transition from one thing that you're leaving behind that you just knows it's ready to let go of, and then you're moving towards a newer endeavor, and you're literally in the middle. You haven't fully closed the door behind you, haven't fully opened the door in front of you. You're in transit. When it's reversed, it's speaking to being stagnant. It's speaking to literally being in limbo. You're not really moving. You haven't really made a choice yet. And I feel like that's a lot of where you're at is emotionally, you're afraid to drop your wall and let opportunities in. You're afraid to believe in possibilities. That inner child work is calling to you, which is beautiful because that's going to be the door. That's the crack of the door that's trying to let you find this healing work. But until you do, you're going to be stuck in this stagnant energy, which is going to keep you from your purpose. That's really calling to you right now. So there's a lot going on in September, but I feel like the biggest invitation is to start that healing work with inner child, let opportunities in, like let yourself be vulnerable to believe that things could be better, things could be different, things could be amazing if you let them, and really believe that it's possible, and tapping more into your natural creativity. And all of that's going to be a stepping stone to not only going back to healing some old childhood wounds like your shadow, and not only plugging into your purpose that's like trying so hard to connect with you, but it's also going to help you keep moving forward and not stay stuck. Because right now, walling yourself off, it's starting to keep you stuck. And that's the theme, right? The theme was you're walling yourself off now. You thought it was a boundary, you thought it was a protective measure. Now it's overkill. And higher self was like, oh, you need to start letting things in again. So I know that was a lot. And I'm not sure how long this was at this point. Probably longer than my usual monthly collective readings are. And if you listen this long, thank you for bearing with me, because like I said in the beginning, I am still recovering from COVID, got a little bit that brain fog going on, but that's ultimately what I picked up. And I really hope that we all can take something from it. I know I'm certainly going to be listening to this myself and taking notes. Thank you so much for tuning in again. I hope you have a beautiful September, and I will see you in October.
Are you in the need of guidance around love, career, family, life, or purpose? Embark on a spiritual journey inward with an intuitive tarot reading. Depending on what you're needing and looking for, I offer private one-on-one sessions as well as personalized email readings. It doesn't matter what the question is. A reading with me provides connection with your higher self, offering curated personal messages, or what I like to refer to as spiritual roadmaps, guiding you to the future outcome you desire. Readings are insightful and affordable. If you'd like more information or to schedule a reading with me, please see the link below. Thank you for joining me on another inspiring episode. Remember, your purpose is a unique and unfolding path. I hope these conversations have ignited a spark within you. Until next time, keep exploring, growing, and embracing the beautiful adventure of connecting with your purpose. Stay tuned for more meaningful conversations. If you enjoyed the episode today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for joining me on this journey.